Hi everyone, welcome back to Perception Paradox. My name is Jivila and today we are continuing Slush 2025 series recorded recently in Helsinki, and today's guest is Allan, and I've been hanging out in the media lounge and we've just got into a very nice chat with Allan when I offered him the candies from my home country. We started talking. I've got to know that he's been working within media for a long time. He's been creating conversations for over 30 years. And after diving into the storytelling, into overall human connection and media landscape, I invited him to join Perception Paradox. And yeah, if you want to hear some insight and knowledge and wisdom from someone who has been in the media game for quite some time, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Real people, real stories, and real challenges that break the status quo. I'm your host, Jivila, and welcome to Perception Paradox. Allan, we just met and you're like, yeah, I would like to continue conversation in podcast. So usually I say, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Perception Paradox podcast. And we're here at Slush, and it's your first Slush happening here in Europe. How are you experiencing it so far?
Oh, it's first class. It's absolutely first class show. I'd been invited last year. I wasn't unable to come, even though I'd intended to. This year I did come. 15,000 people, all run by students. The energy is amazing. It's the real thing. First class.
And Allan, I think you're the first person whom I've met and who had asked so many questions during the lifespan. What brought you to the media landscape and to working for such news company as BBC and perhaps even more different channels?
Well, yeah, I mean, my wife was with BBC World Service for many years, a very famous correspondent. I got into this for love. I went to join my wife, who was at that time State Department correspondent. I left the career I had to be able to join her. And then I did something I enjoyed so I could be with her, and that was technology. So I started writing, and then we came up with the idea of the radio show. And that was 35 years ago, 9,000 shows, and still going strong. And,
wow.
And it's been a lot of fun and met a lot of interesting people. It literally, our first show was literally the very first laptop, usable business laptop that anybody had ever made, with the CEO and founder. It was a company called Compaq, which made at that time the best IBM-compatible machines, better than IBM's. And he showed off his machine. He had this huge storage capacity for a laptop at the time. First time anybody had put a hard drive, had 20 megabytes of storage, which is about the size of a Word file today.
That's wild.
Yeah. So that was, but it was amazing. And we've watched the industry grow ever since and go through all its different iterations, met a lot of the people that created the industry and interviewed them. And it's been quite a ride.
Well, I can imagine. Like, it was even before anybody heard about podcasting. It was when the media was way more dependent than right now. We see the big rise of the independent media and creators also, I wouldn't say taking over, but joining this whole ecosystem. How has it changed for you?
I'll give you a really concrete example.
Please do.
When we started the show, it was February 14th. We did our first show. You did it all on audio tape at the time. So we went over to FedEx, Federal Express, and dropped the package to be shipped off and broadcast. We went to have dinner and went home, my wife and I. And 3:45 in the morning, the phone rang on the day after Valentine's Day. And it was a major family emergency, and I had to leave right away to go to Europe. And so we had to produce the shows. And at that time, we had to produce everything over the internet because phone calls were ruinous and none of the technology there was no internet. There was nothing really. Then even email was complicated production. And so, now we've gone to the time of, where you can do Zoom calls and you have wonderful air quality, and you can be with people that you want. You have physical presence, and then you have also real presence over the internet. So amazing stuff. AI, powerful computers, little phone that's more powerful than what took the astronauts to the moon.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember your first shows? How did that feel? Did you immediately know what to do, what to ask, how to behave?
My very first show was a program. It went out over the BBC. It was heard by about 125 to 150 million people when it went out, just like all my wife's broadcasts were. Yeah. And I was absolutely terrified. Terrified doesn't even begin to tell you what it was like. And that was all doing it recorded in advance. So yeah, that was an experience and a half. And it was so many takes to get it right.
So it was not from the first take?
No, it was not on the first take. Anybody that claims they can do it on the first take is either incredibly talented and probably more talented than all the most famous artists.
Yeah.
Or is lying. And the likelihood is they're probably lying. Almost everybody does a recording, and then they go back and they listen. Yeah, it's not quite right. Let me redo that. Or they hear it and they redo it. So you have multiple takes, because that's how you get quality.
Yeah. We already touched base a bit in our conversation before jumping into this podcast booth. I love it because you're literally from the guy from the news who just like, oh, what if we would do a podcast? Yeah, let's do it now. I was like, oh, sure. Okay, cool. So what did you learn over the years about asking questions? Because it's always not about someone not having what to say, but people say it's asking the right questions and the right way. Is it such a thing as the right question, or how does that work in media?
Well, I think you asked the right questions. So that's the answer. I think this comes to something really important, is that if you go into an interview knowing what questions you're going to ask, then you don't listen. And if you don't listen, you can never ask the right questions, because the right questions depend on what people are saying and what each individual is talking about. And you have to listen. And if you've got your questions in a head, it's a checklist. You just go through, they rattle off what their response is, and then you just go on with the next question. There's no relation to what you've just heard. And you can hear that often when you get stuff. So the whole secret, listen to people. After all, that's why you're interviewing them.
Why do you think we're so bad at listening nowadays? Were we always that way?
I don't know. I think one of the things I've seen is that people become more and more isolated. They want less and less human contact. And I think that's very unfortunate. There's so much wonderful things to learn and so many wonderful people to meet, so many fascinating people to meet. And, everybody is an expert on something. They're very knowledgeable about something they care about. And that goes from anybody from the head of state to head of corporates to the person that sweeps the floors and drives a bus and does the garbage collection. It's amazing when you talk to people and you start to listen how rich you discover they are in their lives often, and what wonderful stories they have to tell and what expertise they can bring.
Well, in real life, it's not everything butterflies and beauty. And I find that nowadays the pace we are going through destroys a bit the humanity and our social skills. How do you approach difficult situations and maybe more difficult conversations with people who are more close and perhaps a bit angry with this world?
Well, there's a lot to be angry about in life. There's more defeats usually and more failures than successes. And the only option we have is whether to fight for better or just to accept and do nothing. I believe, like many, that you have to fight for the things you care about. And I think that the path forward is truth and focusing on empathy with people. This doesn't make me naive. I'm very realistic about the world. I've seen some of the good sides. I've seen some of the bad sides of the world and life. But I believe that people are basically decent if you give them the opportunity and you treat them well.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? You have to be aware that there are some people that are anything but nice. They're really nasty people. And you've got to keep away from those people. You run away from them as quickly as possible. I knew a guy once, wasn't the nicest guy, but he did have sometimes very interesting observations. And one of the things he said to me was, life is very simple. It divides up into two kinds of people. People you want to keep close to you and people you want to keep far away from you. And you know what? He was right.
Mm-hmm. Over the years, well, you've met a lot of people, right? Through your radio show and everything. Do you remember what would be your favorite? What type of conversations are your favorite?
That's a really good question. The kind of people that have made the technology industry go forward have changed. When the technology industry started, they were people that wanted to make money, but they also cared about changing the world. It's like Steve Jobs said when he was trying to hire a new CEO, John Scully, and he said to him, do you want to keep making sugar water, as in Pepsi, because he was the head of Pepsi? Do you want to keep making sugar water, or do you want to change the world? And people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, these people, yes, they wanted to make money, but above all, they also wanted to change the world. And there was a moral factor that mattered to make things better. I think that the huge amounts of money have changed a lot of that moral, ethical sort of stance of trying to make the world better. Google started with the phrase, do no evil. And I know we spent time with the CEO and founder, quite a bit of time with him, so Sergey Brin, and he was a lovely guy, and he really cared. You could see that in the early days. He was, their phrase that they used was "do no evil." That was their motto. That's gone now. That's been eliminated, and I think that tells you a lot about what's gone on with the industry. And the industry has to find its way back to being moral, I think. So, the people I liked were the people that actually cared and wanted to make a difference, and did.
How can we find the way back? Because one of the questions I popped in my mind while you sharing this question, and even during yesterday as well in the conversation with ethical morales, right? How, let's say, some media channels are being manipulated for the sake of some others' benefit, how the positioning of different messages is, and sometimes we can see, I would say, some ethical violations happening. And do you think we can find our way back to transparency and truth?
I think we always can. The world has always swung between good and bad.
The pendulum always swinging, right?
That's right. So the pendulum is swung, and I think it's going to have to swing back at some point.
Yeah.
People will realize that we can only survive as human beings if we live in community and support each other. The Bible says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I think that's always stood, and I think it still stands. And I think that's one of the elements that will come back to the technology industry too, when that starts to come back into our philosophy of life. Social Darwinism is not the answer to everything.
Talking about the answer, well, in this role, as you've been covering for many years as public speaker, the host, communicator, I've been pursuing it, let's say, full-time for the last 2 years only. It's very important also to find your authentic voice. What do you stand for? How do you translate the message? What was your journey of finding your authenticity as someone who is creating space for stories to be shared?
It's another good question. I think the only way you find the answer to that is by making a lot of mistakes. And then you try to learn from your mistakes. And eventually, what you realize is you don't get any smarter as you get older.
No?
But you don't know more what you want, but you know a lot more about what you don't want. And what's
100%.
left is what matters. So
Yeah.
I think that's really the experience I take away. Is I've not learned much more about what I want, but I sure know a lot about what I don't want to have any part of, and what's left is the standards, the moral standards, I guess.
And how did you approach that learning process? Did you listen to some feedback? Did you seek for some mentors, or you were a badass smart who just, that's something I need to change?
No, I just went and made mistakes.
But how do you know that
And
you made a mistake? Well, what indicates? Because it's also hard to measure. It's very subjective.
It's true, but when a 2x4 hits you over the back of the head, you usually notice it. You say, "I think I've done something wrong."
Please elaborate.
So, no, there's nothing subtle about making those important mistakes.
Yeah.
So you turn around and you say, I don't want to do that again. Einstein was once asked, "How do you define the theory of relativity?" I says something to the effect of, it's really quite simple. If you're a man and you're with a beautiful woman, an hour seems like only a second. But if you're a man and you sit on a hot stove, that second feels like an hour.
Yes, that's true, actually. Allan, I have another question about the work, because I find it very fascinating that you've been doing that for 35 years, and it came to your life, it seems like not fully planned, and it stuck with you. Nowadays, how do you approach your work? We have such a big change in the media landscape, from attention span that our society... we just don't have attention span. It's so short, the way we consume the content, right? Even with the film scripts, let's say that's a good example, that some producers are trying to make it way more simpler, that people who are scrolling could still follow the movie. I had a conversation earlier this week about literally such adjustments. So how did you adjust the way you do your work?
Well, there are people now that are producing very short dramas, which are like 1 minute per episode, and that's geared around the idea that people's attention span is apparently fallen demonstrably below that of a goldfish. So it's lower than 3 seconds, the attention span. That's just a problem in life. You have to adapt to it. We tell stories that are relevant to people, and the experiences that holds people's attention because it's relevant to them. If you do stuff that matters to people, it'll hold their attention. If the stuff does not hold their attention, then it probably doesn't really matter to them.
And that's okay.
Yeah. If you have a fascinating person, you can sit there and listen to them for hours and keeps your attention.
Yeah. What is a good story for you?
Good story for me? I guess somebody wants to listen to, is interested in, or that I'm interested in. Look, you have only 24 hours in a day, and 7 days in a week, and so on and so forth. And you choose what you're going to do. And you either want to numb yourself to the world, or you want to pay attention to the world. And if you want to pay attention to the world, then it should be with things that matter, that are interesting to you, that are going to have an impact in some way, in something that matters to you. And you don't know what those are until you find them. So you look around and you keep trying different things, and eventually you find something you like, right? Isn't that how it worked for you?
Yeah, 100%. It's all about curiosity and trying and looking and getting a bit of a burns from the stove, and then just spreading some cold air and then continuing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's it. So, you discover trial and error, and eventually you realize what really matters, and where you want to go and what you enjoy.
How important was having the vision in your life?
Vision? I don't think, I think the Bible is full of people with vision and visions. Yeah. But seriously, if you want to travel from Paris to Helsinki, where we are, it's very helpful to have a map and to know where you want to. It's clear. It's good to have a good idea of how you want to get there and where you want to go when you travel. So having an idea of what the future is matters a lot. It's very helpful. But you always have to remember that sometimes the roads may be cut, there may be damage to the road, there may be some kind of something that comes in the way. You may have a breakdown in the car, and your plans may have to change. And your goal that you're trying to reach may have to change. So, vision is a good idea, but I think it's very helpful to A, know where you want to go, and 2, be ready to change and adapt to circumstances, because life is never orderly. It's never orderly. It's always surprises and changes.
It's like building a startup.
Yeah.
In a way.
A startup is very much like, I think you're right. I think it's very much like building a startup. Things change all the time in ways you never imagined possible. And what do? You pivot and adapt.
Wonderful. So you've been creating lots of content, asking many questions. What kind of content do you like to consume yourself?
I like to listen to podcasts. I'm going very much back to reading audiobooks or listening to audiobooks because they have a much longer sort of interest span, and they can go much deeper into things. And I love the sound of a book well read. There's a real difference between taking a book that is read by somebody who has acting talent, as a professional, and just reading something that somebody has just read.
Yeah.
It's not an expert. And that's the difference. That's the magic. That's why when you were a child and somebody would read a book to you, it could be magic.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where I am. That's what I love.
That's beautiful. And have you ever thought of changing your career or pivoting? Have you ever got bored of asking questions?
No, I mean, we created successful startups, my wife and I. We've done all kinds of different things. But do I want to stop doing the radio show? No. I love being able to talk to interesting people and ask them questions and learn the answers. I'm curious. And journalism lets you ask all kinds of questions of interesting people, and they actually answer you.
Yeah.
And they actually answer, and it's really great.
So before we close the conversation, it couldn't go through my ears. You mentioned you created some startups. What kind of problems were you tackling?
Well, one good example was a company we created that helped companies solve the problem selling and also training. Because training, you want to show examples of what works and why it works. And in selling, you also want to be able to show what your product does with good examples of companies that have successfully applied what you do. And so we created a company that did case studies. And after coming up with the idea, we started to figure out how to do this efficiently. And I eventually wrote a whole bunch of software that we rolled out and built the company around. We later did another version of it, more advanced version, which was about 80,000 lines of code in web objects, which was a pretty substantial operation to build, and that's tricky stuff when you get to that level. And eventually we got a bunch of patents for it, and those patents were bought by Google eventually. And so we had all our clients were people like American Express, ATP, what do you call them, Intel, and many others, Mass Mutual. And you could kind of go through. It was SAP. It was a laundry list of all kinds of major corporations. We were authorized suppliers to all these companies. We were really good at what we did. Very fast, very consistent quality.
That sounds big. And very big players you had on board for your company. And was it difficult later on to disattach yourself from the company you founded? When it comes to the different identities we carry through life, and some of us, we get so attached to it that we forget to let it go, to allow something new to come into life. How was it for you?
You create something. It's like a child, and letting go is hard, but you have to. And so we did, and we saw it as a way to have new opportunities and create new, better things. So it was good.
Beautiful way of seeing it.
It was a good experience, and it was fun. It was interesting, and maybe the world was a bit better a place after it.
But it's all about having the hope and taking some action that the world will change. So, Alan, we are getting closer to the end, and I do have a tradition on the podcast to leave the listeners with a thought to ponder. So, what would be your thought for the day for everyone who has been here with us today?
I think listen to people, like we talked about. I think, you listen to people and you learn a lot and you build relationships if you actually listen to what they're saying.
I couldn't say it any better. Alan, thank you so much for finding time and joining me here today. And thank you everyone who listened to us. Have a great day wherever you are. Thank you, Alan. Aww.
Cheers. Thank you.